So yeah, just touching base, Newcastle United now know their fixture list for the 2025-26 season. And as we have all noticed by now, Newcastle have had a tough start. I mean, look, with fixtures, you're always going to get, you can always scrutinise the fixture list and say this is going to be tough, this is going to be tough. But yeah, I think definitely a trip to Aston Villa, be highly charged atmosphere. There's rivalry already between the two teams. Newcastle just finishing ahead of Aston Villa at the end of last season with that sort of spluttering run and getting through on goal difference, and that's all that mattered. Newcastle finished where they deserved. Aston Villa finished where they deserved. Newcastle obviously beat Villa 3-0 at St James's Park, and Villa won 4-1, down at their place. So, look, going to Villa Park, always very difficult, but really, Newcastle fans they'll embrace this trip. It's always one where people seem to enjoy that bit of rivalry and sort of the crowd to and fro, and it's got history, this game. So yeah, tough start, and I think the first home fixture, the TV companies will be falling over themselves to get their hands on that one. Newcastle against Liverpool, very tough. The champions coming to town. Yeah, it's a real explosive start to the season for Newcastle, and it's going to be tough. But you look at that first month with Leeds tagged on the end, a trip to Elland Road. Again, highly charged atmosphere. 2-2 down there last time the sides met, with Sam Allardyce in charge of Leeds. If you remember, that wasn't that long ago. And Newcastle, on their way to Champions League football, got a crucial point down there. So never easy at Elland Road, but 3 great fixtures, and we can get excited about it. You could look at it and think it's tough, but you can also look at it with a bit of enthusiasm as well. And I think that's the way Eddie Howe will be looking at it. May even prefer that Newcastle have full focus on it rather than there's no such thing as a flat game, but had you got Brentford at home and Bournemouth away or something like that, then that would potentially be deemed as just as much pressure, really, in my opinion, because then you would be expected to win those 2 games. So this gives everyone a chance to focus, and it's a really good start. The 2 derby fixtures, obviously Newcastle haven't played a Premier League derby for a long time, and it's going to be great. The Stadium of Light, Newcastle last time out in that fixture, lost 3-0. Colaccini got sent off. It was a long time. It was 10 years ago, and Steve McLaren was in charge. So those fixtures will be eagerly anticipated. I think the fact it's in December may, arguably give Newcastle a slight advantage if Sunderland get off to a bad start, and Sunderland are rooted in the bottom 3. That could make life tiny little bit easier for Newcastle. We know all the cliches, phone books going out windows. But the other thing that I noticed on there was that it'll come at the end of a European week, so we don't know the Champions League draw yet. Who's to say Newcastle don't have a tough trip in midweek and then face up to a derby with very little preparation time? You would prefer to have the full week to prepare for a derby, like you would with any game, but especially a derby. But Newcastle will have a European fixture, so whether that's at home or away, we'll have to wait and see. And the squad, obviously, as it stands, we're sitting here on June the 18th, is a concern. But I'll come on to transfers a little bit later and have a discussion about that. So that's the first derby fixture. The second one will be in March, end of March, and really other fixtures to sort of look at. I think realistically, I always look at the festive fixtures. That's my, after seeing who we get to begin with, then the derbies, I then go to the festive fixtures. And I think that Newcastle's schedule is relatively kind. I think Man City away is a tough game, but in terms of, I'm thinking about the supporters here, in terms of travel, that could be a lot worse. So that's the day after Boxing Day as things stand. The 27th of December, Newcastle away to Manchester City. Then a few days later, away at Burnley again, not at home over the holiday period, but not that much of a long trip really. You can do Burnley there and back in the day quite easily. It's one of the shorter trips. You know, I personally welcome Burnley back into the Premier League from the sort of point of view of the geography. Newcastle fans not having to travel, not having to pay for hotels and things like that. This is an opportunity to do that, and it's over Christmas, so you know people will be off, and it's just an opportunity for them to have a sort of shorter trip, which is great. And then to see in the new year, obviously Crystal Palace at home, and yeah, that game for me will be, you know, a good way to start the year. A good competitive game against the FA Cup holders, and you know the battle between the two domestic cup winners, if you like. Newcastle win the Carabao last year, and Palace win the FA Cup. So that's you know got its own sort of feel to it as well. And you know the next place I would probably go to is the end of the season. Newcastle away at Fulham. That game's been played on the last game a couple of times. I think Rafa Benitez got a good win down there. I think Steve Bruce got a win down there in, you know, the lockdown period where Joe Willock scored down at Craven Cottage. So, you know, good weather always lends itself to the last game of the season. So hopefully that can be a good way to wrap up the campaign. But yeah, it's, you know, this season the scrutiny is always going to be on Newcastle. It just had that year where they've got in the Champions League and won a cup. So can they better last season is going to be, you know, where they're at. And to do that, they're going to have to get busy in the transfer window. A lot of people wondering what is going on with transfers. I think Newcastle really, while Paul Mitchell leaving hasn't been ideal, I don't think that will affect anything. What we'll probably learned in this month is that, you know, Newcastle we're probably never going to utilise that first period of the window when FIFA opened up the trading between the 1st and the 10th of this month. And I don't think Newcastle are ever going to get involved in that. I think Eddie Howe spoke, he hinted at it, he wanted to, he said that before, saying it was an opportunity to get transfers through the door early, but it's something that, you know, never materialised. And, you know, the reasons being probably because teams have cranked up the prices so high. With Newcastle, that's something they're going to have to manoeuvre in the remainder of this window. I look at it and think July is going to be the month where it really heats up across the board in the Premier League. And for me, Newcastle need those 4 signings. We've seen the players that they've been linked with. João Pedro being one of them. Big asking price of 60 million. Would you pay that? You let me know below here. Personally, if I was sort of pushed on it, I would say, yeah, go for it. You can't have enough good players, but it's going to come at a premium, and that's what Newcastle need to sort of get used to. And it's one of them where, you know, Newcastle are going to be charged that top price, and unless you've got those out of contract players lined up, then it's going to be difficult. Alanga at Nottingham Forest, another one. You know, I've spoken to my sources down there at the City Ground, and they're saying that, you know, he is a core player for them. He's an elite player. He's someone that they see who's going to take them forward. So they're not going to sell him at anything lower than the sort of asking price, you know, which again is going to be up there with, you know, 50 million, 60 million. Newcastle's going to have to pay the full price for these players. There's no getting around it. And, you know, they've got their own PSR issues as well. So they're not the only team dealing with that, but because of the cycle that they're in, they're going to have to be very careful with it. So, yeah, I also expect some departures as well. We've already lost some players who've left the club on free transfers, people like Jamal Lewis, that'll cut the wage bill down. But I think really, you know, if you're a Newcastle fan, I don't think there's any reason to sort of panic. I know other teams have gone ahead and pushed on and got a few players through the door, but for me, it's not time to panic. You know, Eddie Howe, he's got it right with most of the signings that he's made at Newcastle, with or without a sporting director. You know, he's been pretty unlucky really with the situation that sort of unfolded, you know, the Dan Ashworth affair going to Manchester United, now Paul Mitchell leaving. He's been pretty unlucky with things like that, but by the same token, he is the man who's made sure that they've got signings through the door, you know, like Bruno Guimaraes, like Kieran Trippier, like Alexander Isak. He's got a good record, and I think you can trust Eddie Howe and his backroom staff to get this part of the window exactly right. So for me, no panic. It's one where, you know, we're all over it every day, seeing if there's any kind of links with Newcastle that are, you know, gonna be pushed through. But again, Eddie Howe has been meticulous with his data, and he's always got the players that he wants. So no panic from that point of view. Newcastle now move into that next phase of the window, and as I say, going into July, I do expect it to really heat up. Newcastle pre-season tour coming up as well, playing in Singapore and South Korea. By the time those little sort of tours are over, then I do think Newcastle will have players through the door. Won't be easy, never is with Newcastle transfers, is it? But I think ultimately Newcastle under Eddie Howe, you know, we can all trust Eddie, and we know that eventually they'll get the players that they need, and, you know, build on what was a massive success last season.